Good morning. Hi, everybody. My name is Norman Fang at Norman's Orchid Nursery. And this is one of our over 116 episode, maybe. And today we're going to talk about the Paphiopedilum Fairieanum and its hybrid. And Jeff, can we focus on the flower on this one here? Fairieanum is one of my favorite species. It is native to northern India. Okay. Surprising, India, despite we all thought India would be hot and dry and humid. This is the northern part of India, very close to the Himalaya area. This is the blooming size. Okay, you do not want to buy the leaf span smaller than 4 inches. Okay, the reason you don't see a lot of Fairieanum is a very slow grower, and also they're just not the type of orchid that most of the nursery willing to take the time and the effort to grow them. For example, a blooming size Fairieanum like this. This is what we consider blooming size. The blooming size will have at least 1 to 4 leaves. 4 leaf span, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a grow. Guess how old this plant is? This plant took us over almost 5 years. 5 years out of flask from the baby plant to get to this size. Once you get to this size, it's actually very easy to grow now. There are a couple items that I want to share with you today. I have been growing Fairieanum since the early 80s. When I first introduced, one of my orchid mentors is Mr. John Mueller of Mueller's Orchid in San Gabriel, California. And John is make a lot of earlier primary hybrid for the store orchid, the very famous store orchid in Southern California back in the 70s and 80s. And I always liked the Fairieanum. The species itself is just really elegant. It had the beautiful, elegant, the shape. And also, I want to share the back of the flower. Okay. Many of our members and the viewer might be in the Orchid Society for judging, or for American Orchid Society, or even ribbon judging. The back of the flower is very, very attractive too. Now, they come in 2 colors. This is the red form, the regular color form, but they also have an alba form, which I don't have it in flower because they do flower at different seasons. Fairieanum is a wonderful species. They actually have one of what we consider the perfect straight spike in orchid judging. 5 points go to the flower spike. You see here? You don't even need a spiking. It just naturally go up, and it's when you cross with the multi type, which is when you cross with this with the multi type, which is the variegated, the tropical one, you got the Fairieanum. You see here? So this is the baby from this cross with this. So despite the Fairieanum do not have any marking on that. The multi type, the variegated leaf, to translate into the next progeny. Okay, but you still can see the influence of the Fairieanum on the next progeny. It still had a beautiful, elegant spike. This is what we usually say, self-supporting spike. And on this, how many of you have tried this species before? Anybody? Okay, it's not one of the easy ones to find. Every time we offer the Fairieanum, every time when we sell out one batch, even if we repeat again, they don't always give a lot of viable seed. I don't know why. It could be the remake it with the same parent, but maybe because the moon, the star, the same parent, just when we remake it again, doesn't guarantee you to have a lot of viable seed. That. So this is why a lot of time when you see Fairieanum, I don't care how inexpensive they are, if they offer on the eBay or any social media area, if they are less than 4 inches, do not buy. I guarantee you 50% of them are going to die. Okay, the reason I'm going to show you, okay, most people, first of all, when you go in Fairieanum, do not overpot them. This is the blooming size, and it's still in this rose pot the last 3 years. Okay, one thing about the physiology of the Fairieanum, the species itself, is very different than the, let's say, the colossum, the Mauria type, or the Lawrenceanum, the species from the subtropical Asia. Their root system, I'm going to use this as a sample. This is actually the one that need to be repotted. Fairieanum have very, very fine. They don't give you massive of the root system. So if you get in the Fairieanum with only 2 or 3 leaf root on them, that's okay. That's natural. Okay, and I'm gonna put this side by side. Jeff, can you focus on the? You notice how small and how refined, very thin leaf, on the root, versus what we call the Mauria type, the variegated Mauria type. I'm not gonna beroot them. I just want to show them side by side. Okay, now you can see the difference. Okay, it's all about the root. So the Fairieanum as a species genetically have more smaller, very thin. Okay, they're very elegant, they're very slim root system versus the colossum type, the Mauria type. You see the difference? Okay, so we like in mind the Fairieanum. It's always better to underpot them, smaller size. The biggest size for this, 3-inch pot is actually about the adequate size. This is the plant after the flower finish. We will cut out the spike because they are monocot. Okay, well they're not monocot, but they will have new shoot come out after the flower finish. And this plant, this particular flower has been opened in spike back in November 2022. It finally flowered back in, if first opened in about first week of February. It takes a long time to develop. So one thing about Fairieanum, take your time. Okay, one thing about watering that you should look up is, you notice that they all have this sap here. Okay, this is how they protect the insect. Okay, at the same theory, a lot of the time the water might stay inside, and that might cause the rotting of the flower spikes. So make sure you, when you water them, always water early in the morning, so this get to dry up by night. And this is perfect to grow under light. And make sure you have the in spike. They enjoy closer to the fan, a lot of air movement, because where the species native come from, they were on the foothill and they grow on the top of the decomposed foliage. And the area also have a lot of natural air movement. Okay, so that is the key. We're not trying to, we cannot duplicate exactly the natural habitat, but where the natural habitat come from is give you a very good guide. Another thing, for my over 20 years of growing Fairieanum, the species itself is this very similar to the, if you go the pansy type Miltonia, they are sort of dormant. They don't, when it's hot, short day, Short night, long day is when they don't flower. Uh, they actually do not very active. They do not like hot and humid summer. So if you go on this in South Florida, what I usually suggest my customer in South Florida is either grow this as a house plant. Nothing wrong with growing them outdoor in South Florida or Florida. It's actually very cold tolerant. So if you have a cold snap, the first thing you move is you move your vanda in the house, right? But this, as a species, they can easily go down to 50 degrees. The only requirement they have is they do not like really hot and direct sunlight, even in the morning sun. Okay, you notice that how thin and how pale the foliage is. So they actually, if you are growing in a greenhouse, all right, I know I visited Alfred's greenhouse in Simi Valley. Okay, this is where, if you have a really hot area like in Dallas or Texas, you will want to put this, the plant, the species, at the north side of your greenhouse. The north side of the greenhouse is usually too dark for your camellia to flower. But this is actually a perfect location to put it in your shady location of your growing area. So if you are growing under light, you have a different light label, for example. Always put this at the very, very bottom of the light tray, because they do enjoy cooler area, because with the heat rises. So you do not want to put this on the very top shelf, because top shelf usually is higher temperature. So this is a little bit what observation. And if you grow in a greenhouse, for example, or if you have a path system,
is it the same amount of light as like a phale? Can you grow them with your phales?
They are great companion plant with a Phalaenopsis. It's just that a little the difference is the temperature requirement. It can tolerate lower light down to 50 degrees. Okay. In fact, a lot of time we tend to put this with a phale house closer to the path system. But the phale house, sometimes we put it minimum 60 degrees. We forgot to lower them. What I do is I will put the plant outdoor on Southern California for just like the way you trigger the standard Phalaenopsis. Put it outdoor for 2 weeks. Mark it on your calendar, and remember to bring it back after 2 weeks. Okay, put it back into the house or back into the greenhouse. Okay, you do that with Armeniac, Paphiopedilum Armeniac, and the proboscis also. And so this is how you can kind of manipulate the temperature, because every time we tend to grow a lot of everything in our collection now, and which is okay. But just remember specific, some of the species. Remember all the complex, the Bordeaux type. Many of the Bordeaux type had the species actually coming from the same area as a Fairieanum. And there are some primary hybrid have been crossed with Fairieanum. So if you have come across the label, say something crossed with Fairieanum, you can always expect the leaf to be smaller and always have this very elegant hybrid shape coming from here. You see that this is with the Malia type. Okay, I have personally loved some of the primary hybrid. For example, Jamie gonna get some of this. This is Paphiopedilum Iona. Iona actually is a primary hybrid, and we remake it. A lot of times we better parent. So the Iona, unfortunately, I do not have a flower, because biological hybrid tend to flower in the summertime. This is kind of odd season. I happen to have, when I walk in for collecting the light print for the talk, I saw a Fairieanum hybrid in flower. And so when you cross this with Bolotulum, okay, notice the leaf. Okay, the variegated leaf would always dominate on the foliage over the Fairieanum. So you still get that beautiful variegated leaf. Then Iona will be have velocity shape, more smaller, more slender, but the arching, the graceful spike, and the color will be dominant onto the Iona. So Iona will be a fun primary hybrid to have. And what else do I like to grow on this Fairieanum? We talk about the light, we talk about the water. The only thing about really need to pay attention on growing the species. It's actually easier now. We actually do two sibling strain of the Fairieanum, because back in the 70 and 80, most of the Fairieanum was jungle collected. This is before CITE, before the Endangered Species Act for the animal and plant. They would just rip off by the thousand, shipped from India through various sources back in those days, and by the time they come to West Los Angeles, they were dry. Think about that dry vegetable. So if you have a 100 plant shipping, maybe about 20% or less will be survive. So and then back in the 80, 70, 80 came, the CITE enforced. So a lot of the Fairieanum in United States are what we call the selfing of that importation back in prior the CITE. So I have been very, very fortunate because everybody know I travel a lot to Asia and to Japan, and guess what? It took me almost 5 to 10 years to build in the two strands. We have the one that we're going to share with Jamie. Here is actually, many of you met Masa from Tokyo Orchid, right? He was here with Jamie last week. This is actually using the Fairieanum Monte Vista, which is originally from John Ewan's strand, the jungle strand from the 70s, okay? But the pollen parent is the flower that Masa gave me on Tokyo Orchid. We call it Fairieanum Kyoto. Okay, it's beautiful, big pollen. So it's different strain now, because in Japan, they do have access to some of the new import from India. Okay, I believe in the natural habitat, you cannot locate any more Fairieanum. I probably got extinct. I think maybe was at one point was in Appendix 1. So this is why we do this. I'm doing this. I'm not doing this for the money, but really for the conservation. Somebody got to do it. 5 years to get to here. If I don't do it for the love of the orchid, there's something wrong with it. So this is actually very fun. There's two strands, and Jamie did a good job. She cherry picked, always pick the biggest one for her customer. And this is blooming size. These are 5 years old, and they are very easier, a lot easier, because a lot of time when we do this from out of flask, most of the stuff that you see on the eBay or the social media, people try to sell you what I call the eyelash size, a tiny little one, just right out of flask. A lot of them are less than 6 months because they want to get rid of them, because many times they cannot grow them. Okay, by the time when we defrost them from that tiny little eyelash size to this size, we tend to lose about 30%. When I say loss, it's not that I cannot grow them, because we tend to, for myself, I tend to just toss out the weed grower. Okay, this is why a lot of time I do not recommend people want to rescue plant when they go to the department store. The phalaenopsis are so stressed. Okay, they are bad plant to begin with. Do not rescue that kind of plant. Oh, I do not want to have those baby plant. When they're from seed, there are a lot of genetic involved. The weak plant, we tend to, if the plant haven't been sit there, doesn't do anything for 2-3 years, there's something wrong with the plant, the gene. So it's easier to tox it up. So we don't pass on to the customer, or waste our time to grow them, take our bench space. You know, our heating bill is getting more expensive. So this is why, a little bit background story, why I do not recommend trying to rescue plant, because you know, or if the plant that we offer in our company, we always send out the biggest plant by the time. So we are about 30% of the population. Either weed grower, they are genetically back grower, they are not as disease resistant. We just talked about. So this is why always buy the biggest plant is available, and this is always I try to pitch on every topic. When if a space is available, if the financial situation is available, buy the biggest plant, especially when it comes to very, very desirable species like Fairieanum. Okay?
That's what I do. I want to see the bloom as fast as possible.
Yeah,
and I don't want to have to grow it forever.
I'm 62 now. Why do I want to buy that tiny little baby plant? Might take another 5-7 years to grow.
I want to see it bloom as soon as possible.
Yes, yeah.
So
Time
I like
is
to buy
money.
The largest one
time is money. You can
available.
always find the smaller one that people want to get rid of, but you
cannot find
you
the large
cannot
one.
find
You
the
can
bigger
always
one.
find the small
okay,
ones,
so
exactly.
when it comes to Fairieanum as a species, do that. And another thing before I leave today, the message I'm gonna come across with you is, this is why we developed Norman orchid fertilizer. Okay, Fairieanum hate urea in the fertilizer. Okay, if you look at my formulation, this is why we developed our own fertilizer. Most of the fertilizer, if you look at your lawn fertilizer, look at the source nitrogen. 10% or more, I guarantee you, they're gonna be urea. You know why? They're the cheapest source of nitrogen. But the urea is for plant grow in the soil. Orchid grow in what we call soilless. Not all the orchid in the wild grow in the soil. They might be what we call terrestrial, but they actually grow on the top of the decomposed leaf or on the top of limestone. They not grow in the soil. They cannot breathe in the soil. And urea, soil nitrogen, does require a bacteria in the soil to break down to nitrate form, then available to the orchid. So this is why you're not actually feeding them enough nitrogen, but the urea is the root system, remember I showed you, they're very, very fine, right? The fine root system is very sensitive to salt in the water, but especially the urea in any fertilizer. So if you are listening to this podcast, and now we get podcast customers from all over the world now. Okay, I was in Costa Rica the other day, the other month. People stopped me at the show and said, Norman, I love your media, I love your channel. And I said, do you subscribe it? He said, oh, I do not know how to do that. So if you are listening, make sure you subscribe. Okay, that way you get notified when we have the new, when Jeff upload the new media. Okay, so water, try to get as good. If you don't have good water system in your area, trying to get by the distilled water or purified water. Doesn't have to go to our water. That's too extreme. Our water is very, very expensive. You take 7 gallons of regular tap water to make 1 gallon of our water. So, and the feeding, make sure the fertilizer, or just get the normal orchid fertilizer, that's easy. Does not have any urea form of nitrogen on that. And they always, because the root system, they always benefit from extra leaching.
Mega Thrive every other week?
Mega Thrive every other week. At least, at optimum, during the growing season, you will do it twice a month. But if you don't have a time or forgot to do it, minimum once a month will be sufficient.
You have 3 different substrates. You have these in a lot heavier perlite. This one looks like it has moss or a little bit more moss.
Yes.
And this one over here is in fir bark.
Yes.
Can you explain to us what you choose?
Right. This is the batch we found out very, very we like it very much, and we actually are in the process to offer this type of media to the public. This is what we call the Japanese the way. This is actually a very fine pumice in Japan, and it's a type of clay, and so they fire up at over 1,000 Fahrenheit, so it's sterile, and this is what the type they use for the bonsai, for their neophanesia at the bottom, or for the very desirable, very rare, the Oriental Cymbidium that need to have good root system. The best part also is kind of slightly pH alkaline, which is it had the right pH for a lot of Paphiopedilum species like Fairieanum.
So are you developing this specifically for paphs then?
Yeah, we are actually testing. I do not like to offer anything to my customer. I have a very long follower. Okay, unless I've been tested minimum 3 years, and I'm convinced, and then we take a lot of data. My background is in tissue culture, so I had to have enough statistic number to convince me the percentage of it. And we also this also have a special pumice rock that we imported from Turkey.
Okay.
And not all the pumice rock are equal. They are much better than the perlite type of pumice rock that we have in Arizona. So, and it does not have the dust that perlite. Now, perlite is a very dangerous substance because it causes lung cancer. So if you're working with perlite, make sure you have a mask on. The pumice rock from Turkey is wonderful. We tested on the for Cattleya too. Anyway, so focus on this.
So just back to it, when do you choose the moss, and then when do you use the fir bark?
Okay.
I know those are different
Yeah,
plants.
this is a different hybrid.
Right.
So these are crossed with the Maria type. So as a straight species, they love because of their fine root system. They do not like to have a heavy mix. This is why we develop what we call the light terrestrial mix.
That makes sense.
Okay, so there's lots of some other species, even jewel orchid, for example, really enjoy. They want moisture, but they also like a lot of air in their root system. So this is why this kind of new, what I call pumice rock, is beneficial. We will release this this summer. So, and
I notice it's a lot different than anything we've seen.
yes,
I mean, we've never put this on a podcast
we
before.
always,
You've never shown
I
it.
always try something different, and I'm convinced because look at how, I think I started with just 6 bottles, and the way the mix helped me, I got 90% of survival rate and retention rate.
And I also notice back there you have some that are in moss, some you've done in fir bark, and then others you've done strictly
Yeah,
in this.
for Fairieanum,
you've tried all
for
different.
Fairieanum as a species, remember now, the root system is different than any other Paphiopedilum. Okay, they're more refined, they have less root. So the water quality is very important. The source of the nitrogen in the fertilizer is very important. Make sure there's no urea nitrogen in there because they will definitely burn the root.
Linda Lee
on the
Earl is
Ferrianum.
asking, how often do they like to be repotted?
They actually like to repot I haven't repotted this one for 3 years. They hate disruption. They do not like to be disrupt on the root system.
Because they don't have a lot of root.
They don't have a lot of root. So the best time, very similar to the Phalaenopsis, we only repotting right after the flowers, before the summer hit, because you do not want to repot in the middle of hot summer. It's, especially if your summer is humid, really hot. I know Linda is in part of Virginia,
Virginia.
and sunny. Also, you in Louisiana. If you are in South Texas, okay. If you cannot repot it before July, skip it. Just let it go until the fall when the weather is cooler. Okay. So this will complete
Wait.
the talk on the Fairieanum hybrid and the species.